Hello, and welcome to the third day of the 9th Annual World Ocean Summit. I'm thrilled to be joined by Bonnie Wright, actress, activist, and author. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here in conversation with you.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm Nellie de Goguel. I'm the content and community manager for the World Ocean Initiative, which helps host the World Ocean Summit. And I would love to kind of start at the beginning. Were you as a kid, were you really interested in the ocean and nature? Were you more of a city girl?
Yeah, I feel like I was fortunate to have an almost like split kind of personality in terms of I grew up in the heart of London, in the city of London. And then also we spent a lot of time as a family. We had a house on the south coast of England along the English Channel. And so I really did have this kind of split life between the city and then also just the beautiful playground that is the seaside. And I think without realizing it when I was young, it actually had such a deep impact on kind of my life and how much enjoyment I got from just coastal environments, and have continued to kind of throughout my whole life and love the ocean so deeply.
Absolutely. I think as someone who was kind of brought up in London myself and then moved to Rhode Island, which is, in America, it's the ocean state, you realize the energy and the beauty of nature much more when you kind of come from that urban jungle setting. I'm completely with you there. And you're an ocean ambassador for Greenpeace now, and specifically focusing on ocean plastic issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, particularly focusing, on ocean plastics and also just the connection to the fossil fuel industry, petrochemical industry, and sort of showing that link between the two and how plastics kind of isn't kind of a perfect accident. It was almost sort of created as a kind of byproduct to the fossil fuel industry to make the money when things are beginning to decline with the use of fossil fuels. So just really looking at that connection between the two industries and how it's kind of always a constant battle of our individual actions, but also our collective action when approaching policy or when approaching kind of corporations and sort of putting pressure on them to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And didn't you go out on a vessel with Greenpeace as sort of like an assistant deckhand, kind of, or looking at sort of issues around ocean plastic? And how was your experience with that?
Yeah, the first time I experienced that was going on the Arctic Sunrise, one of their ships, and we were traveling through kind of the Gulf of Mexico and just the Atlantic kind of east coast of the United States. And it was just a really life-changing experience. I felt so inspired after just a couple of days on the ship, with the fellow sort of deckhands and the ocean campaigners, and just their sort of commitment to the cause, and was just so inspiring. It was back in, I think it was 2018. And I just definitely had a growing kind of concern and interest and sort of curiosity as how I could get involved in the change I wanted to see around ocean health, and really going on that ship and being inspired by the individuals on that ship. And then also while we were on the ship, we were trawling every day for microplastics. And I was just so shocked that you were just in the middle of this seemingly sort of clean and pristine ocean. And, every time we trawled and every time they had throughout the course of this kind of 2-month long trip, plastics would come up from, tiny pieces that you could barely see to larger pieces. So just being just a part of that one tiny moment of seeing what research must feel like for so many people, where like the facts are there, the plastics are there, yet kind of still we struggle to kind of, push that change at the kind of level that we need to. So I think just seeing that firsthand really brought the issue to like a tangible kind of in front of my eyes moment. I really left that trip back in 2018 so kind of committed and kind of, there's obviously an anger too. I think you bring this kind of frustration and kind of, which I think then it was led by a curiosity to just understand the systems at play a lot more and just really understand why this is happening, what was my role within it, what things could I physically change in my day-to-day life, and maybe what other things were kind of beyond my control and needed more of this kind of policy kind of reform or kind of pushing corporations. So yeah, that trip was a big changer for me.
And that's such a good point, because I think often there's a lot of onus on the individual to change our own habits to fight this plastic pollution problem. But as you said, it's a systemic problem. It's much bigger than just an individual action, although collectively, obviously, individual actions can add up, and we must do what we can. What are some shifts that you've made maybe in your own daily life that you've really noticed has kind of cut the plastic out of your day-to-day?
Yeah, I think, there are definitely times where you can get too frustrated and too hung up on things that can be impossible to change. And I think that always highlights the system issue there. And it makes you realize, like, oh, okay, why is this really difficult for me to do without plastic for this one kind of, scenario? And that's always something, it's kind of a red flag of where the system is a problem. But for me, I think why it was so important for me to really change things in my individual day-to-day life is because I wanted to feel positive and be part of the change I wanted to see, rather than kind of think that nothing I do will ever make a difference. I think, we should believe in individual power. So, for me, I decided, rather than approach change in my entire home looking at single-use plastics, I started in my kitchen because I find joy there. I love to cook. So I thought, okay, I'll take something I love and intersect it with something that I want to change. So for me, it was just looking at packaging within food, also how I was storing food, how I kind of cooked differently, cooked more from scratch, less kind of processed, packaged food. And I think before you know it, you sort of see, oh, wait, I can easily begin to sort of lower the waste that I'm taking out each day within my rubbish or recycling. And I think a big important thing for me too was just how much I'd assumed and relied on the recycling system without really questioning what are different types of plastic, what does the numbers and labels mean on these packaging. So that really just made me realized that I took a lot for granted or assumed a lot. There's that great phrase, wish cycling, which is this idea, you just put it in the recycling bin. You didn't really check if it could be recycled, but you just hope it will. So I think it just was, just making my education and knowledge around it more broad, so that I felt like at least I was making decisions that were more informed, even if I still get frustrated by the fact that, it can't be a totally sort of plastic-free life. I think I at least feel a bit more kind of in control of the decisions I'm making and a bit more informed.
Absolutely. I think education and like self-education is so important with these issues too. And once you dive, pun intended, once you dive into the issues, especially around single-use plastic, you see the chain, you see the life cycle, and that wish cycling thing you mentioned, it's so true. I think all of my friends just assume like, oh, it's plastic, it can just go in the recycling. It doesn't matter what kind it is, right? I'm just like, well, no, actually, it depends on where you live. It depends on your own like regional recycling systems, and it can be quite complicated. And so that almost education of your own like local waste management is so important.
And that's what is hard to giving people advice, because it is so different from place to place. And, we're living in places, within the global north, where we're sending also a lot of our waste elsewhere to be dealt in other countries who have already very, very stressed waste management system, and people living by open dump sites. And it's really taking responsibility for that too. How so many countries a couple of years ago closed and weren't accepting any more sort of foreign waste was actually a moment where we realized, oh wait, we didn't even know we sent it elsewhere. So I think also it's that, like, how are we maybe putting pressure on other people and other countries?
Definitely. And I think that's kind of a climate justice point, right? When we think about these issues, we have to think about sort of the social implications of how we address them, right, as well. And I would be interested to hear your take on sort of the intersection between your work and climate justice around like ocean space, or maybe in activism in general.
Yeah, I think a great example or a big learning for me was just, you get into single-use plastics and try and inspire everyone, don't use them, stop using them. But the reality for so many people is that is the only access they could have, for instance, to clean drinking water could be in a plastic bottle. So you can't sort of stand on a soapbox and scream, no more single-use plastic bottles until it's addressed at a kind of climate justice level, which enables everyone to have access to clean water from the get-go. Otherwise, making those better choices is kind of not there for everyone to decide. So that was definitely a huge, just tangible idea of just that learning kind of curve. And also just talking about, waste being shipped elsewhere, even with our own countries, the kind of disproportionate sort of effect that sort of different polluting industries can have, even if it is just creation of plastic, say a chemical plant, plastic factory, or sort of even just where landfills are, and how that is always usually around lower income and marginalized communities, and how it's usually very kind of clearly and unfortunately and unjustly placed, because there is less kind of power within that community to fight against that landfill being there, or have the politicians living in that neighborhood who don't want that to be in their neighborhood. It's such a reflection of the kind of demographic. And so that's been a huge, learning curve for me, and realizing that we can't just eradicate everything without kind of having support, as I say, to, clean drinking water or affordable plastic-free options. If those are always going to be the more expensive thing to do, then unfortunately, that isn't the main reason that people are buying their produce. It's because of the price point. So, it's a massive sort of hard thing where, again, it comes back to policy, and until things like that are in place, that enables it to be there to be protecting the people and the planet, so that individuals don't have to constantly be kind of torn between these choices every day.
Absolutely. And I think you touched upon something so interesting, sort of going back to the life cycle, say, of single-use plastic. I think so many people focus on the end of life, sort of where it ends up. But even the production of plastic can be toxic and affects communities disproportionately. And so it's really considering all of it and how complex that is. And you're right, and how policy and technology interventions need to kind of consider all of it, right? Yeah. So kind of shifting to sort of 2022, what is exciting you right now, sort of in the ocean space?
I think so much excites me within the ocean space. I feel like the ocean as an environment is an incredibly resilient and kind of regenerative landscape that I think, if we just let areas alone, can do incredible things for regeneration. I think, whether that's even just focusing on repopulation and regrowth of more kelp forest, and how plants within our ocean provide something like 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe. And I think we also put a lot of focus sometimes on the atmosphere absorbing these rising temperatures and emissions, but the oceans really are kind of our lifeline of our sort of, they're like our windows and our thermostat of this earth, and they really keep us living here. We really would not be here if it wasn't for our oceans. So I'm just so inspired by different sort of technologies and farming things that are happening within, particularly within the plant life within the ocean, and how that can be just such an incredible solution to sequester carbon, and also even within sort of a food too. Can be used within different foods and cooking, where different seaweeds and kelps, and again, making sure too the implication of that is just, I feel like so many solutions can come into this world but not really pay attention to making it also a just system, and not coming in a kind of colonial way and deciding to sort of take up a huge part of the ocean and decide that this is our stake in the ground and this is our area. So I think it's said that we need to protect at least 30% of our oceans to kind of have a chance of keeping the temperatures as we need them. So I think things like, there's the Global Oceans Treaty as proposed by the UN, and marine protected areas, things like that. That's definitely something that I focus a lot on with Greenpeace, just those, the importance of global kind of initiatives and protection that not only are put in place, but also are kept up with. So yeah, marine protected areas and ocean treaties to make sure that we let it alone.
Absolutely. We're very excited about those big key moments for the ocean this year. There's a lot happening this year, and it's, a lot of treaties hopefully coming out, and marine protected areas. You're right. There's so much exciting work going on in them. But again, the way that we approach these, we can't just one country just can't come in and say, this is how we're going to do it. We know how to do it without incorporating the voices of the people who depend on that area, say. Otherwise, we're not addressing the problems, right?
Yeah, and on their knowledge of their coastal community and area, they have witnessed it through generations, and it's looking towards people, and that kind of knowledge just can never be as good sometimes as sort of data, actually listening to people and hearing what they want, not coming in and sort of putting in our own set of ideas, but having that integrated approach.
Definitely. Well, I'm conscious that we've run out of time, but I just wanted to mention, because I know that you have a book coming out this year called Go Gently, and it's all about sort of tell me what it's about, because I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It's basically a book that kind of came out of these different actions that I was taking at home, that I was purely just doing for myself to feel a bit more kind of in control and part of the change I wanted to see. Everything felt so overwhelming and kind of lacking in any tangible sense of anything. You know, I'd go to the climate rally or a talk and you just leave so inspired, but you come home and you'd find that quite hard to sort of keep up with that sort of energy and excitement. So it looks at individual actions that we can be taking in our day-to-day, all corners of our home and living environment, and looking at how your first environment of your home can really be this place that reflects your values for the outer world. And it kind of really talks about, similar to what we're talking about, our actions can't end with what we're doing at home. This is just kind of a beginning. But I found by going inward and going home, I felt just a little bit more kind of at peace and a bit more sort of empowered, that the foundations of my advocacy work felt reflected in my home. And so, it looks from everything from, packaging, food waste. It's very full of recipes of different things we can be doing at home, from making our own cleaning products to beauty products to food things, to really understanding what all those labels and things mean on packaging that are hard to decipher. And also looking at how you can find community within your local area and connecting to the issues at large.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, I really look forward to reading it. And it was such a pleasure speaking with you. Our time is brief. I'm sure we could have talked for a while about a lot of different things. But yeah, thank you for joining us here at the World Ocean Summit. And best wishes and good luck with all the great work that you're doing out in the world.